and then will assign people, and then we'll discuss if that's where you want to be assigned. But everybody gets put on these things.
Okay.
So that's tonight's discussion topic, apparently.
Yeah, okay.
What? Oh, I should have been paying attention.
Oh, wait, no, that's what we're going to talk about. So, oh, okay, we got this on there too. So.
Oh, okay, thank you for explaining that. I'm glad you asked in advance before the meeting starts, huh? Oh, and they have the,
I don't see
oh,
him
this
yet.
was
We'll
an
wait, we got a
envelope.
few more minutes.
Yes. That's what I like them to do
Oh, okay.
the work. So you have all the necessary thing like this right here.
The inserts
This one here
wasn't in the email.
was not in the email. So that's why it's better to have them do it.
Oh, see, I didn't say nothing because I thought he probably has a point or why he's requesting it. And I should have raised my hand then, but either way, they brought us copies.
And what's your name again?
Lourdes?
Lourdes, okay.
Yeah.
And where are you? Right here, Lourdes? Okay, perfect. How do you pronounce your last name?
Howdy,
Adiki, okay.
and which one's yours?
That's what we have a committee to do,
I'm the last one.
collect them
Oh,
up. and the
Douglas,
committee
and then I
also
know
goes
he's
out and
Phil.
finds
I'm Dale.
Oh, you're Dale?
you
Who's
know, and
Phil?
again,
Oh,
there's
that one's Phil. Oh, because they moved it around. They moved the sign.
So we usually have
Howdy,
copies.
Gee?
How do you pronounce it?
Howdy,
Everybody
Gee?
does
Like
stuff.
if it was an H.
Everybody does stuff outside.
Howdy, Gee.
Howdy.
Howdy, Gee.
Oh, we're almost ready to start.
Almost like saying howdy, howdy, Gee.
That's a little bit unusual.
Yes, it is. Okay, for some reason I always thought you were Phil because your sign was there that you sat here. Yeah. You're Dale and Douglas. These are my neighbors.
I don't see Robert is not here. Our vice chairman isn't here tonight.
I should have called him today and see if he was coming.
Maybe he thought it was me.
Both Wes and Robert are longtime members of this board. They go way, way back.
Oh, I figured that when they were going back and forth, I said they've already been on this board before. And who else other than you?
I could do it.
There's
Do the roll call.
Pardon me?
only Wesley, you, and these three people were in the board before?
I've been on the board one other time on the deal, and then, of course, Wes and Robert have been on for a long time.
And then everyone else?
Guess we'll wait
I'm a
another
longtime
minute or so in case
resident.
Bob's going to show up, but
Oh, no, Bob is not going to be
Oh, he's
present.
not?
It's
In the
for
real
his,
estate
he's
business,
going away for his birthday.
I
For some
really
reason,
know
I
the town
thought,
well as
I
far
thought you
as
were
real
CC'd on
estate
that, but
goes.
yes.
okay, so we can,
Moved here in 52.
ready to start. I'd like to call the City of Stockton Cultural Heritage Board to order at 5:31 December 5th. First order of business is to call the roll.
Forgive me if I misspeak names. Wesley Swanson,
That would be me, and I'm here.
Robert Holzer,
Clearly absent.
He's absent.
Anthony Corradi,
Present.
Thomas Groom,
Present.
Lourdes Jaurigue,
Present. That's
Phillip Merlo,
Present.
Dale Nichols,
Here.
Melanie Vieux,
Present.
Douglas Vigil.
Here.
Clearly a quorum. Do we have items on the consent calendar?
No.
No. So now, I think, so we're moving on. I think Bob brought up the plaque issue, but he's not here, so do we have a
That's an
presentation?
informational item, yes, 3.1. So before you, and I put them as attachments on the dais, there's a list of the historic landmarks and the city's historic preservation districts and historic sites. And a lot of these do have a historic plaque, a sample right behind me. This is from a historic property that unfortunately was burned, so we no longer have it. But this is to show what was the type of landmark that the city historically placed at approved sites. Currently, there is no official budget line item to fund these. However, I have received word that the city is supportive of reinstating that program, so I'm currently working on locating some funding so that way the plaque program can be reinstated. I'm also researching a vendor that can make the plaques. I was thinking to follow a similar format in terms of design. There are different mounting options. Chairperson Swanson did mention that some are more on a kind of like a parapet kind of stand as opposed to a like pole such as this one. I think it also depends on the type of structure or area. I've seen some that are actually mounted on the property itself, so that could be something that could be decided on a case-by-case basis unless the board would like to establish specific standards, which can be something should you choose to do. So I do not have cost information yet, but I wanted to bring a sample and just give you an idea of where some existing ones are. In addition to that, I provided the nomination for designation as a landmark site or structure of merit. This is kind of our all-in-one form, but this we would utilize this if someone wanted to put a plaque on a property. So just so that way you have a copy of that. All of these documents are available on our website under the Cultural Heritage Board subsection in community development. Or I'm sorry, boards and committees. So that was the informational item regarding plaques. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So can you tell, Carrie?
Go ahead.
I was wondering, how long, do you have a different kind of plaque that was in City Hall? 'Cause I remember there's a book that I have, it's a large size book, and it had the plaque on the City Hall. Is that the same plaque that was on the north side of the, no, the east side of the?
So I'm not sure. I know that this is an example of recent plaques that have been put in. I imagine that there are some style differences over the years just for maybe some older plaques. I do not have an inventory of like pictures of every single one. If that's something the board so wishes to see, staff would need time to compile that.
I think that's something that we would like to see. What would the plaque is based on, have some monetary history, or what was story been told about regarding the plaque, you know,
So just to confirm, the board would like to see a compilation of pictures of every historic plaque in addition to any financial information as to how much the plaque cost. I will say that's going to be difficult to find for some really old plaques. I'm not going to be able to find how much the plaque cost.
Okay.
Just because those records may not exist anymore. But for current plaques, I can at least give you a current market estimate as to how much new ones would cost. But I don't think I can give you how much a plaque cost 25 years ago.
No, I'm just saying that whatever historical plaque landmark that was taken out from different property that taken, see if we could look at it and evaluate and then refurbish, update, you know, as far as,
So you want to replace existing ones so that they all match?
yes.
Okay, so that's two items. And so you want a compilation to kind of show what we have out there and then possibly initiate some sort of a program to replace older ones for consistency.
Right.
Okay.
Well, that might not be cost effective.
Generally speaking, if the plaque is in good condition, we don't touch it.
Well, I know, I understand that it won't be cost effective, not now, I mean, but I'm just
Here
saying,
forward?
yes, that's what
Okay.
you're saying,
Okay.
for the future.
I can bring an item back at a later date where we can go more in depth in terms of if that's something the board so would like to recommend. Obviously, I'd have to escalate that to council regarding a replacement program. But how about I start with that compilation and just kind of give you an idea of what we have out there?
Okay.
And then we can go from there. Is that acceptable?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I would add that one of the things that we can do, and we have committees set up, is visiting. One of the things that the board is supposed to do is review landmarks and visit sites. And looking at this list, I know that some of these are wrong. There are missing plaques and there's mislabeled plaques. What the plaque says and what's on the list is different.
Okay.
And you know, it doesn't cost anything to update the paper. You know, for example, most of the larger houses were called houses, and the smaller houses were called homes, except when there's two of the same name, and then we have the Wong house and the Wong home, and that was done for, it's the same family, but the two different locations. So our list should always have whatever's on the plaque should match what's on the list. And then, of course, the ones that are missing, what comes to mind is the Church of Christian Science, for example. The plaque on that one, I'm pretty sure, was scrapped by the current owner. So those are the old bronze ones, and those are, of course, worth stealing. These aren't, fortunately, because of the pole standing types. But the other thing about plaques is that if we're going to replace them, like for example, I'm not sure if on California Street, we have the old engine structure for the streetcar system. I forget what it's called. Anyway, the plaque I think is missing from that one, I'm not sure. And if we're going to replace plaques, and if the owner would prefer it attached to the building, the plaque is half as expensive than if it's one that's on the poles. So, by just going out and inventorying them, and the board itself can do that, which is kind of the mission of our, purview anyway. So that way it gets done as well.
Okay.
Do we have some idea as to the cost of these plaques?
I do not have current data for that. That would be something brought back as we delve a little deeper. Right now, I wanted to at least present the information that I had available regarding existing design and locations of existing plaques. But if my memory serves me correctly, I want to say it's going to be at least 500, I would imagine, just because you have to have them designed individually, and then the cost of casting and having them shipped over, and they're pretty heavy. So I want to say at least, they can be expensive. So, and they're double-sided, so that's
At this point, the property owner would have to come up with the money because the city doesn't have any available.
There is no available funding at this time. However, there are private and public plaques. So if it's a city-initiated designation, the city would pay for that plaque. If it was a private, then that would be done by the property owner.
Anthony, you have a question?
I think that answered my question. My question was if the property owner was willing to pay for the plaque themselves, is that something that is allowed or the city needs to fund it?
No, that's allowed. I think that the city would appreciate following a format, and that could be something that would be approved via the board as to how you want them to look. I think for the sake of consistency and so that they have that sense of authenticity, they should be similar.
And Dale, a question?
No.
Oh, I thought your hand was up.
I might have some, maybe I can speak to you offline. I have some reresources for vendors to talk to. You were, in your efforts to.
Thank you. Any additional
submit,
information is always
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was going to say, depending on the number of letters, you can get them fairly inexpensive depending, so.
Yeah, I'm going off of this size, double-sided, casted. It's got a lot of letters. It's a little bit more expensive, but yes, you're correct. A smaller one is less expensive.
I'm curious, there isn't any local vendors that offer or could provide the same service instead of going outsourcing?
In my previous research, I did not locate a local, metal caster. That's not to say there's not one that exists, so I can look further into that.
I think there are 2 still functioning in Lodi,
Okay.
although I don't know what they would charge for such things, but I think there's 2 left.
Good to know. Okay.
There were a couple of years ago, we never had used them, but they're general foundries casting all kinds of things. Yes, sir.
Well, let me see. With the cast, I know that there was a lot of problem with the fire engine plaque that was stealing, they were removing plaque from it. Is there any way there'd be an extra, something to protect it from people from stealing the plaque? Because I know it costs money to throw and then they probably recycle it or something, but just further along to preserve the plaque and have it secure from preventing from stealing it. Did that have happened before?
I think that a lot of the thefts, as kind of alluded to by Chairperson Swanson, is that they were made of bronze, and that is a valuable metal. The current blends now are not really valuable to steal. That's not to say someone wouldn't want to vandalize. Okay. There are also some security mounts that can be utilized when installing the plaque, which does assist in preventing that from happening. Unfortunately, in our day and age, if someone wants to steal something bad enough, they find a way. Mm-hmm. In terms of weather and hard water and things like that, I don't know if there's really any protective methods we could use on a metal plaque. But we do utilize what's available to us in terms of the security mounts and the proper mounting procedure in terms of concrete and bolts, et cetera.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, fortunately, the aluminum ones have generally been lost, cars run them over. Mm-hmm. But the bronze ones, I think, are mostly all been stolen. As with most of the bronze building mounts in town, too. There was a rash of thefts a number of years ago. All the bronze gates were stolen from the rural cemetery. There are dozens of those, so.
Fortunate.
But the aluminum, fortunately, it's not real valuable, so.
I made an observation when I went to Portland. They have it in the cement where you're walking and you actually could read it and see it in your feet. and it's mounted into the cement. And I thought that was pretty interesting because you don't have to worry about anyone taking it, but I would say I don't know, it works for them. I don't know if that's something we could do or no.
If it's a flush mount, it requires a fresh cement pour, which can be costly labor-wise and also materials-wise. If it's not flush, then that can lead to potential liabilities. So it kind of depends on how it was mounted. Was it flush in the concrete?
I think so. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it kind of depends. I mean, every city does what works for them. I think it also depends on the project and what if the property owner's paying for it versus if the city's paying for it. But I'm sure that with the board's consensus, we can find a method that you approve of. So this was just an informational item, so I'm happy to answer any other questions, or if you had any needed clarifying of anything.
I guess just for the sake of interest, the last plaque we put back was one that the property owner had taken, which was a city plaque. That was the one, Flacco one, that was about 10 years ago. And then we had to get the property owner to build a plinth back and restore it, but that's just kind of an interesting case. It's back there on, I forget what street it's on, but it's diagonal from the Cabral train station, if anybody wants to see it. It's kind of an interesting one. Pardon? Channel? Okay. No, that's fine. And on the back of it is actually a tombstone because Juan Flacco was buried in what used to be a cemetery at that location, but is now the backyard of an abandoned machine shop. And the graves were all disrupted at that time. So wherever he's buried is unknown, but there's a plaque on the sidewalk done in cobblestones. It's kind of nice. Any other comments or questions on plaques? Then we don't have any unfinished business, do we?
No, there was no continuing items.
Moving on to the exciting new business of committees.
Yes.
Did you have something to say or should I speak?
Yeah, just a brief. So before, in the packet, I did provide the list that was provided by Chairperson Swanson. This is a description of what has historically been set by the board. I also included Municipal Code Section 16.220.040 for the board that talks about the, if you look at subsection C, powers and duties, talks about things that the board recommends for approval, the certificates of appropriateness, structures of merit, etc. The committees generally tie into these duties. They were historically utilized to make recommendations for the board's consideration. There was an email received from one of the board members wanting to discuss the committees and how they work and if like how to decide, what committees to assign members to, or if you want to change the committees, I'm not sure. But now would be a great time to talk about the formation of these committees, assignments to committees, the combination of committees if you feel that that's necessary. It's really up to the board. So I leave it in your hands to discuss this. I know Chairperson Swanson has a lot of historical information regarding these committees and a really good working knowledge. So I think it's a good time just for everybody to discuss it, and we can decide from there.
Well, let me just say a little bit about that, and then we can open up for questions. If you look at the second page of the aforementioned Cultural Heritage Board, Stockton Municipal Code, and you look at item 2, 3, 4, et cetera, these responsibilities, powers, prerogatives, or whatever, we've generally handled through either committees or liaison persons. So, for example, certificate of appropriateness, that's something that would be reviewed before a meeting by alterations and review committee so that no more than 4 members would look at the proposed change, could probably visit the site. And so when we have the discussion to make a decision, some people have actually gone out and witnessed the situation to bring back first-person observations. Structures of merit, the recruiting, looking, foring, identifying, things like that, that would be done by the Landmarks Committee, which basically is under the power of going out and looking for recruiting and improving and finding and inquiring about new informations and so forth. Various liaisons, city person liaison committee, liaison with the Planning Commission. This would be under consulting with other groups. We used to have one with the Downtown Stockton Alliance. We might have one, say, with Mickey Grove. Historical review. We might have one with the Hagen Museum. But basically, we picked a number of things we used to meet with on a regular basis. There used to be a Magnolia Historic District Residents Association that met regularly. We had a liaison with that, for example. Viewing project sites would be something like for awards of excellence or alterations review. So for example, if somebody's nominated a project that's ongoing, a group or a committee would go down and take a look at that. We usually had the review committee, the awards committee, which also went out and looked for projects and properties and so forth. So typically we'd have things offered by a real architectural firm's project. Occasionally we have somebody's yard. So someone's done landscaping on historical property, we'd recommend that sort of thing. Methods of preservation, we've occasionally had architectural firms or engineering companies come before the board and bring us gadgetry and techniques for historical preservation, like window treatments or insulated glass, or other kinds of techniques that might save internal structures. For example, nylon fasteners to hold up lath and plaster interiors that had some particular reason to be preserved that were very difficult to replace because of lack of certain skills. Methods of preservation, review landmarks, and so forth. Anyway, basically members of the committee would send to the chair 3 requests to serve as one of these, or ideally could nominate something because we could invent a liaison as need would be. And then we would make up assignments, and the next meeting will go over the responsibilities and selections. So everybody can do something that they have interest in on the outside. And also because a lot of these powers and things, we all can't go look at something. Because if we all go look at something, then we are again asking for a Brown Act violation. So we always made sure that we have 4 people go and do a review or a site inspection. Or in the case of liaison, just 1 person. And if the thing they liaison with meets on a regular basis, then we'd have a report at every meeting. So, for example, Downtown Stockton Alliance, we always had a report for what they were up to. So.
No, that's not to say, I understand the Brown Act violation, but you are, as board members, allowed to go look at things on your own.
Of course.
Yeah, so if you wanted, if you wanted to go look at something, it's actually encouraged. It's always great to go look at the project that's being reviewed at the next meeting. So it's just that, like Chairperson said, you can't have groups of 4 or, well, 5 or more, because then it would be a quorum and then it's a violation of the Brown Act. So I just wanted to make it clear that you are allowed to go out to the sites on your own to look at things.
Yeah, no, it's just like if we wanted to review alteration review, a certificate of something, and if 2 groups of 4 went, they can't confer. So it becomes, we just basically tried to keep it so we avoided tripping on our responsibilities and violating something. So, any comments or questions?
Yes. I think I just want to make sure that we're remaining efficient in the way that we're conducting the business of this board. And it seems that the responsibilities that we have are rather limited. And so I feel like chopping them up further into these groups may not be the best way to deal with that. So that's not to say that we can't have groups or committees, but all of these, it just feels like it's such a small portion of already limited business that it just seems very inefficient to me.
Well, the idea would be is that if you're going to have a review and it's at this meeting and you want to make a site visit, you can't review or vote on it till the next meeting. But if we have an application submitted at the beginning of the month, the group can go out and review the project, and then at the next meeting we can vote on it. So ideally it increases efficiency because we have previewed and got eyeballs on a project. And the problem is that when we start having actual reviews of modifications to buildings, the people that want to do it always emphasize time is of the essence, and we're always under pressure to make a decision at the meeting, but often we haven't actually seen the project. So this is how, again, we could do it a different way, but this has worked well in the past. And the other thing is that if we're going to go out and look for structures to make into landmarks, it's an ongoing process. So the idea would be is that we have some people that should monthly come back to the meeting and recommend certain structures or other things other than buildings to be either base structures of merit or landmarks themselves. So the idea is to get a process going so every meeting we have a full agenda and can make some decisions.
So are the committees supposed to meet in between, like meet in person in between regular or is this like all conducted via email?
Well, a liaison, who, for example, the Downtown Stockton Alliance, would go to their meetings and they have a report. If there is a architectural review meeting of a committee, and we have an application, say, from a citizen for a structure of merit or a landmark, that those four members would meet as a group on their own recognizance and visit the site and come back at the next meeting when the decision is supposed to be made. So these committees act autonomously outside of the board itself. So the idea is that they will be doing useful tasks which have been specified in city code, that we collectively really can't do in this group, in the room. So if we decide to visit, well, I'm going to put it this way. If every time we have applications come in and they come in early, because they used to come in at regular intervals, that the committee can then meet at least once a month and go review the upcoming agenda. So at the meeting, they'll be able to say something that we wouldn't otherwise know, because a lot of times we'll get applications with very poor imagery, or they'll want to make a modification that we can't really understand. So this way, we've had some people out there, and at that meeting, when they visit the site, they can confer, discuss, debate, do whatever they want, because there's no violation there, and or seek expert guidance. They can have a question and get it answered from an architectural historian or something like that. So when they come back with a recommendation, we're able to make a decision.
Okay.
I have a question, Chair. Can we break it off? Because I know that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 person liaison, and the responsibility of those, it's like a subcommittee. That I'm trying to understand what you're trying to say. For one, each person, it's like this board, it take one, and then you have the Land Historic Committee as well as Acceleration Review, Publication Media Committee, and Awards, Excellent. So who received the application? Are we advertising the application outside the public community, or are we the one that?
We actually have in the past. So for example, the committee that has to do with outreach and communication will contact the newspaper, and we can usually get, for example, the Record to put out a column saying that we are looking for projects to be nominated for different awards. And then the awards committee will actually go out and look for things. So they will actually communicate with different community entities and community outlets. I suppose somebody could do Facebook or multimedia type stuff, but they actually do go out and communicate. We used to actually recruit, and we would get 30 applications every year. This hasn't happened for a number of years, but we used to. And then, Bob usually has done that. He takes great enthusiasm, and he'll do a big slideshow, and we'll sit here one night for a few hours and we'll go over a whole bunch of applications. So it's kind of exciting. We also, for example, are able to communicate with other groups, like, for example, Delta College, where we can do programs out there with them. We've done that in the past as well. Okay, so this particular group that you're referring to, I have to have a group to go to the meeting outside? A liaison, a single person, for example, with downtown Stockton, would go to every one of their meetings and bring back a report to us. Okay. Or will be some other ones. Like I said, the Magnolia Historical District used to have a community meeting. That's been gone. That group dissolved a number of years ago. So let's say, for example, let's my understanding. So if we have a liaison that's going to go to a planning commission every once a month. Okay. Yeah, if we have a liaison to planning commission, ideally every meeting, possibly there would be a meeting the person wouldn't go to because the agenda didn't have anything of interest, but ideally every meeting and come back, because we're supposed to act as an advisory to the planning commission. Right. And if a person is there, the chances are they'll be asked a question, and that can lead to an agenda review item because of some project. And historically in the past, we've had very limited communication with the planning department, which is who we're supposed to be kind of in lockstep on a lot of things. And that in recent years hasn't been happening. But we had a member of the Planning Commission here last time who was showing great interest in coordinating our efforts, because hopefully the Planning Commission would like to get more proactive in getting plans done that consider culture, history, and heritage in the future of the city. Okay. So if somebody said, I'm just thrilled with planning, they can be the planning liaison. They nominate themselves. So and again, we could, the thing about some of these liaisons is there are probably other groups and entities, like the Hagen Museum. We've never had a liaison. Maybe we should have a liaison with the Hagen Museum, for example. So we have new liaison for Hagen Museum. So it adds up. Yes, these committees liaison. Well, the Magnolia doesn't exist anymore, that group, so no liaison will be there. But these committees and liaisons were invented many, many, many years ago. Obviously, we could alter them with our own at will. So if we have a need to communicate, the idea would be is to have members engage with the community, bringing in information. A number of years ago, there was a time when we actually had regular attendees. People of interest are coming in, but again, we kind of had a disintegration of interest in reservation, but we'd like to get that back.
Okay.
And so going out and talking with people is, of course, a practical way to do that.
Okay, good, thank you.
Any other, so, I mean, there's no action to be taken on this other than if people would review this and send me a list of what they'd like to do and/or have a suggestion to add to it. Because these don't have to be the committee assignments, but I think some of them are quite good. The awards one, we used to have a banquet and a celebration. We had quite an affair. We can do that again. That gets a lot of community interest. So anyway, if everybody has my email address, and they could send us a list, and so everybody can find something that they're interested in and be committed to. And
If I could be
Up to committee
CC'd on
members.
that, just for the sake of knowing what to
Sure.
put on the agenda for next meeting.
And please offer suggestions, because it's not written in stone, it's written on paper. Any other comments, or unless somebody would, so we have no other planned. I do believe we have, I'm jumping ahead to future agenda items, so.
If I may, just to kind of close this one out, for the sake of, I wanted to address the committees prior to the bylaws, since I think the bylaws should include like a description of the committees. So if the next meeting, I want to say is January 6th, right? January 6th? 2nd, oh, sorry. If you want this agendized for the next meeting, I would need your nominations or volunteer of committees or liaisons relatively quickly, so I can get things set up for next month's meeting.
We can do it very quickly,
Okay, so,
provided we get suggestions.
yeah, so maybe within a week, please, so that way I have time to get things going.
So for example, if there's no longer a Magnolia liaison, so
Uh,
will that be replaced, or?
It could be replaced, and we maybe, if we have a liaison, we can create an organization. The Magnolia District is our largest historic district. The other district is really just a few houses. So it's kind of the thing we're supposed to be most concerned with. So finding or recreating it would be a good outreach thing to get done.
Could I do that one?
Feel free.
volunteer to that
I'm
one?
just saying that
Magnolia?
send it in and we'll form everybody. Everybody gets something that they want to do. It
Thank you.
should be kind of fun.
So what does the city agency liaison do?
Which one?
City as agent liaison. It's-
City agent would be like, for example, the planning department, would know everybody in the planning department and be the person, sort of the front person for contact.
Because it's almost the same thing as the planning commission, so is that like,
No, it would be, the planning commission as a group like this that meets in this kind of a setting, so you would attend they're also appointed, whatever we are, they're similar. And so you would
can I
attend
do
their
the
meetings.
downtown Stockton Alliance for liaison?
Yeah, just send it in and we'll do it.
Okay.
volunteering
Well,
for
we're
that.
just volunteer,
If
just
you
get
want
it
to,
over.
if you'd like attending their
Yeah.
meetings, then that would be good, because they've
Okay.
been actually a very good group, and they're still going, so.
Okay.
And,
Chair, if I might,
yes,
I thought I heard you say earlier that if anybody had any, like, committee suggestions, that they should send them to you.
yes.
But they actually should either send them to staff, to Stephanie, who can forward them to you, so that there's no violation of the Brown Act.
That's
because
fine.
We don't want communications
Yeah,
outside
we
the
don't,
meeting.
just don't want to have circular emails.
Yes, well, we don't want anybody talking outside of the meeting, because it could be construed as a Brown Act violation, so.
So this is the
I understand.
application that we have to give it to him? I mean,
Oh, no, that's for like structures of merit. I think in terms of emailing me with your
Interest.
nominations or interest, a simple email will suffice.
oh, okay, okay.
Can we just do it here in the meeting? I volunteer for this.
I already wrote your name down.
Okay, good.
You're
And
good.
So I
Dale,
don't
did you have
to
a
send an
question?
email.
If we're volunteering for various deals, I'm certainly willing to be on the committee to the Planning Commission liaison
Oh,
and keep track of
okay.
what's going on in the Planning Commission and report back.
We'll report to Stephanie, and we'll get that on the list, so.
Thank you.
Dale. We have Dale, and what was your name again?
And then for the remaining items, yes, if I can get word back by the 12th about nominations or volunteering for specific,
So December 12th, that you need to hear, get an email.
I need to be able to
okay.
get things going for next month's meeting.
Okay.
And how many could we volunteer for?
We just say, sign up, ask for give us 3. I mean, it's not that many, but so we can kind of look over everybody's interests and give everybody something that they want to do.
They'll be assigned in the order they come in. So it's kind of first come, first served, just for the sake of fairness and easiness.
And nobody don't be left out. Just all will be
Everybody
involved
does
in
something.
every board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
So,
Then in that case, could I also add the Landmarks and Historic Sites Committee?
Sure.
It looks like it's interesting.
so that, okay, moving on, I don't think we have, do we have citizens' comments tonight? I see a citizen. Okay. Commentless citizen. My own comments are, I think we have some pending applications for structures of merit, which will be on the agenda for next time, I believe.
So we have a queue. There's some certificates of appropriateness ahead of the certificates of merit. So we should have at least 3 certificates of appropriateness at the January meeting. So the planning division is focusing their efforts on getting those processed first. And then they're also looking at the structures of merit. If they can get everything ready in time for January, they will be agendized. If not, it will be the February meeting. And I met with the planning manager this morning, this afternoon, and that was the status of those items right now.
Because it would be good if we have certificates of appropriateness to know about them as soon as possible too, because then some members could go visit the sites if it's necessary, if it would be useful to do that.
Okay. I will confirm with him which ones he's confident will be ready for January, and as soon as I have that, I can send a note out to the board, just letting you know that we expect these items to be agendized. Things always sometimes, things can change.
Okay, any other board comments or suggested future agenda items? Nope. Okay.
What did I miss?
Oh.
I was looked down. I know, okay. Sorry. Okay.
If none, then I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
I do have a question. I know that there is a fee for submitting an application for, I think, a landmark. The fees that are applied to those types of things, I know it's beyond this board, it's like a city thing, but when does that take place? Like, when do they review fees?
So it kind of goes 2 ways. When something is created, a fee is established at that time and approved. There's also a fee schedule that is adopted every year along with the budget. If there's any recommended changes, that's usually a good time to revisit those fee amounts. Typically, you have to show a nexus justifying why that fee is set at that amount. Is there a certain fee that you'd like us to look into further besides just the application fees for the certificates, or?
Well, I mean, I'm not accustomed to looking at the entire fee schedule. It's quite lengthy. But it looked like it was, besides $1,000 to submit a landmark application, it looked like to apply for demolition was possibly like $250. I don't know if I was seeing that correctly.
You're correct.
That seems a bit out of balance. So that's something that I was just curious if we could look into and hopefully have an idea of when they're going to look over these fees again and address it with whoever we can. So I don't know how we could have a hand there.
I can do an informational item showing the current fees, and once we get a little closer to reviewing because we're doing a fee study for service fees right now, so some of those may already be getting analyzed, but I can at least do a presentation to show what our current fee structure is for things that involve the board. And then if there's any concerns or you want additional information, then staff can research that for you.
That would be great. Okay. Thank you.
Well, that makes me think that I have a request for a future agenda item. And we actually requested years ago an explanation why there was a fee on landmarking, because it had been 0 for 25 years. It had been 0 from the beginning of this existence of the board and the historic districts. And then the city, I won't go through a long speech on how it happened, but it went through a review process, and then they came up with fees for historic sites, certificates of appropriateness, and landmarks when there had been none. I'm not going to say my next comment. And the point was, we did once have a presentation by the 2 planning directors ago on an explanation for what the money was for, which we never had. The presentation came, but we had no explanation of what the money was for. And the question always was, with the exception of a plaque, which they weren't putting up even then anyway, there is no difference in the staff cost of a structure of merit or a landmark. It's the exact same process. And actually, the board does more of the work than anybody else. And the other thing was a certificate of appropriateness, because when we started having fees on them, we stopped having the certificates. And what used to result was we would get a certificate of appropriateness, we would make a site visit, and we usually resolved whatever it was and got a lot of things repaired pretty effectively. And then when the fees came in, we didn't get them anymore, and people modified their properties anyway. So frankly, I'd like to know why we charge for either of those, particularly in the case of historic properties. Because one of the problems we had that the board identified was we tried years ago coming up with a way to incentivize people to want to preserve historic structures and list them historically, and City of Stockton provides no incentives. It provides disincentives for landmarking and structured of meritizing, if anything, while other cities incentivize. And the worst incentive is a fee of $1,000 that provides you with nothing. So, you know, we should go back to the past and remove the fees, at least in historic preservation.
So the city council is the only one empowered to be able to approve, revise, or add a fee to the fee schedule. I do know that, at least in the current study that I'm working on, that we are actually calculating the time staff spends on each type of application. So there is a direct nexus based off of how much it costs to have staff work for 1 hour on XYZ. That's where the fee comes from. So
Well,
I can say from a city perspective, probably for a certificate of appropriateness, there is time that's spent agendizing, preparing the staff report, putting everything together, and that's generally what those fees are for. And I can say with high certainty that most fees do not cover the city's cost in presenting whatever item that is. That's not to say there aren't some fees that need to be looked at again, and I understand that. So I will pull all those fees, present it to the board, and if there's concerns, we can look into it a little deeper and look at that nexus for that fee and go from there, and then if needed, go to the council.
Well, I'd also add that I understand that because that was always been the argument. We just never got actually a cost. When we had a presentation on what is actually involved, short of looking at the application and putting in a filing cabinet, nothing else was ever explained to us that actually happened. And in the case of structures of merit, city code empowers this body with no requirement for application or any other process to determine structures of merit at our own recognizance, as in the magic wand factor, which is no cost to the city whatsoever, other than putting the structure on a list. And the point is the landmark can be put into the same category because we're not talking about modifying, altering, growing, changing. We're talking about listing, putting a structure on a list. And in particular with the case of historic sites, a historic site designation not only puts no onus on the property owner at all, but changes nothing at the site whatsoever. It is merely a designation on paper that something important once happened here. We had a site process done years ago that also evaporated, which was to designate the former site of the Holt tractor factory as a historic site, for example. Everybody would agree with that, kind of without any thought that that's most important. The United States' third largest exporter of manufactured goods to this day, I believe, is Caterpillar. I could be wrong on that, but I'm not that far off. And it was born in Stockton. It all was located on one city block. There's one fraction of the original Holt company still functioning down by the waterfront, which is the Stockton Wheel Company. But the point was, if we don't have the power to make sites, but if we did, and we waved a magic wand, and that is now a historic site, nothing but putting something good on a record has been done, and there's been no cost to the city. So part of that could be the process as well, because I really don't know what needs to be done in terms of this is not the same as putting up a new skyscraper or something where clearly planning is expensive. So anyway, in the interest of getting historical things preserved and designated, I would like to bring that up and streamline it if we can.
Yeah,
Another
it's a
comment.
very good question. I mean, there's a lot overwhelming, like, there's been a lot of information. And, you know, I was wondering if it's like, like last month, we just had our first meeting, and we had a discussion about the mural, about the PG&E, the tower. And that was supposed to be brought up to us to find the cost and what was going to be. I don't know if you remember that meeting last month regarding. So I think we need to be, at the board, we need to be persistent on following through our agenda from last month that we discussed and we create a new agenda for this where we're talking about feed. Yeah, so does the city have to have like a ceiling gap or approve a money cost for what you're saying about money that for plaque? You're giving that look, but You know what I mean, as far as what you were saying? Because you gave a lot of, two different points.
Well, we once had a budget, and that budget, as far as I know, does no longer exist. I don't know what, that's
So
not,
you want to
it's above
create
my
a
pay rate.
budget? You want to create a budget so the city council could, to approve that? That's what you're trying to say?
I think what I'm trying to say here is if we could maybe change the landmarking process and the site process so that it is not a burden cost-wise to the city and more things could be designated. So I would always advocate having a budget.
Okay.
Again, that's above my pay level. I don't know whatever happened to it. But we used to have money for members to travel to conferences. We used to have money for awards. We had money to, when we gave out the different awards we give, we had a banquet with drinks and food. So we actually used to have a budget to do some cultural outreach.
And I understand the desire of the board to reinstate that. I also have to be fiscally conservative, just given the city's, ongoing long-term financial plan, and there's certain things that I have to be cognizant of when proposing new expenses. That being said, I do believe that there is going to be something that is presented to the council to request a little bit of funding for some of those activities. How much, I don't know yet, but I am planning on requesting an amount to maybe help get the plaque program going again, maybe having a little bit of outreach money. I'll do my best, but at the end of the day, the city council is tasked with looking at the big picture, and money can only go so far, but I promise I will do my best to try to get a little bit of funding allocated to assist the board.
I will point out, last time we catered an affair and gave out an award, it cost us about $500. We raised it, we put up the money ourselves from contributions from the members of the board. So all we had at that point was the city giving us a room to use. So we've compensated before, and I suppose we'll do it again, because I'd be willing to contribute to that. Anyway, any other comments or questions? Is that a citizen
Looks
request?
like we have a public comment. Just go ahead and read her name.
And the citizen would like to speak. I don't need the card, I know who it is.
Yes, Christina Fugazi, 1422 North Lincoln Street here in Stockton. And so the question being brought up regarding funding, dependent upon where the location is, I would recommend that you approach the council member in that area because we do have discretionary funds. So if there was something in District 5 that was particularly noteworthy, that was sub $15,000, of course, I would definitely be open to a conversation regarding a plaque, or if there was a fee that was associated with that. I know that I personally would be open to possibly giving the funds in order to make that happen. And I would say, I'm sure there are other council members who too would feel similarly. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
That's a very appreciated comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Fugazi, right? Okay. Any other comments or questions? I've asked the question 3 times. That's the magic number. To have a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
I guess we need a second.
I will.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Oh, that was